I didn't give him the job because his kid is a jerk. I work in SR management at a pretty significant company. We recently started posting for some manager-level positions. My kids both play hockey, and over the winter we played a lot of games before this one kid's rep team. The kid is a jerk. He plays his music loud in common areas, he shoots the ball around in the hallways away from the rink, and has hit a few kids. He goes to stick and puck and steals the pucks from kids just learning how to play. Like I said, an overall jerk. Every time I see his dad just sitting around chatting with his friends, ignoring his kids' actions. So imagine my surprise when I see the dad in front of me for an interview. I have never actually spoken to him or know his name. He obviously had no idea who I was. As the interview went on, all I could think about was how his kid must have learned that jerky behaviors from somewhere, and what can I expect from someone who lets his kid act this way. He interviewed very well. In fact, I thought he was the best, but decided to pass on him just because of his jerky kid. I'm sure he has no idea. I'm curious if he says hi to me at the rink. I stole promotional scratch cards from Burger King, ate burgers every meal for months. This was a long time ago. I was a skater in my 20s. The manager at Burger King had so much attitude I felt he deserved it. They ran a promotional scratch card, a grid of 9 squares. Scratch off any single row. If it contains 3 matching symbols, you won that item. The options were fries, drink, or Whopper. So having worked out that the odds were ridiculously slim, it annoyed me so off I went to Burger King. It was always minimally staffed, so as soon as the server turned her back, I grabbed a huge stack of cards. They were free after all. Every time I went, every time the server turned her back, I grabbed more, always keeping the stack in order. Now I'd worked out that the way to win was fully scratch a card off to establish which line was the winner, then scratch off that corresponding line on the next until it stopped winning. Then completely scratch that one off, rinse, repeat. This meant only about 1 in 30 didn't win, rather than the ridiculously long odds BK intended. The second best part of all this was the manager quizzing me, then getting visibly annoyed at my "I've always been lucky" explanation, but being unable to explain the impossible probabilities of being that lucky. But by far my favorite part was getting a burger off the manager, getting my scratch card, sitting down appearing to scratch it off, but swapping it for a pre-scratched one, then shouting, "Yes, free Whopper." He literally ran over, inspected my card every which way. Poor man. I wasn't keen on Coke or fries, so gave them all away to the younger skaters, who then absolutely pillaged the place. I'd have loved to have been a fly on the wall for the "how much extra money did you make off the promo area" meeting. I'm betting over 90% of the winners of their promo were just me. I stated I was pregnant to keep a high Uber rating. After a sober and random day interviewing across town, I got nauseous in my Uber and didn't ask him to pull over in time. I was obviously sober, so I didn't know how else to explain it other than to say I was newly pregnant, as he talked about his family and being a father quite a bit during the ride. Instead of being angry or disgusted, he empathized. I tipped extra and kept my Uber rating intact. I have a confession to make that's been weighing on me. About a year back, I intentionally sent a bikini picture to my old married boss, but I pretended it was an accident. I cringe every time I think about it. I had this idea that if he saw the picture, he might take an interest in me outside of work. But because I was too afraid to approach him directly, I pretended I tried to send it to a FBB and sent to him instead, same name. He never said anything about it, but I did feel he looked at me differently after. Am I a bad person? Has anyone else ever done something like this? How did you deal with the aftermath? I only hire cute girls or ugly guys at the college job I work. I work a job on campus. I'm a student interviewing and hiring other students. If they're obviously not what the job needs, they get booted off. Everything is fair until there's a tie between a number of students, more than we can afford to hire. After careful evaluation, I choose to hire the top, most charming and attractive girls, and the bottom of the barrel guys. It's good for business. I used to steal cash from the Subway sandwich shop I worked at. The thing is, the open boxes in the freezer, we would just mark with a permanent marker, subtracting from the total each time we removed bread. Knowing he's not actually going to count out the bread in the freezer box, I would modify that count to say there was more bread in the box than there was. He rarely did the bread himself, and if the bread count in the box was low, I wouldn't mess with it to be safe. He never knew the counts were actually off because the system was accurate. I would make cash by not ringing up the order. There's a camera aimed at the cash register, but I naturally blocked the screen, so he wouldn't have seen me not ringing the order up, and I pretended like I was pressing buttons, LOL. I had the subs prices with tax memorized. When they pay with cash, I don't ring up the order, but I put the cash in the register, making a mental note of that amount. I didn't do this to every cash order, just easy ones, and obviously can't have zero cash sales. At the end of shift, we do a cash drop of excess cash from the register to the safe via envelope drop. So while I was counting out the cash to drop, I'd know exactly how much of that was mine. I knew the perfect angle of the camera, that when placing the cash into the envelope, I'd quickly crumple up the money and keep it in my hand while I dropped the envelope into the safe. Then I'd just go do more closing stuff and put the cash in my pocket inconspicuously. I never got caught. On weekends, I could easily make $100 without him noticing. I made over $10,000 from stealing cash alone, and I gave my mom most of my paycheck. I just used that money to put a down payment on my first car. Thanks name redacted, yeah, fucking idiot.
I am an awful person who uses and manipulates people around me. Logic will get you from A to B. Imagination will take you everywhere. I, 19M, am an awful person. I grew up in a very unhealthy household. My parents were addicts, and my parents were neglectful and abusive. My older siblings were the only people around me who cared for me, and I have consistently lied and manipulated them. After my parents split up when I was 10, my parents remarried. My mother married a decent enough man. He was an angry person and he took it out on me, but he wasn't totally awful. I exaggerated about the way he treated me to my mother, and she left him. When my mom left him, I, 17, moved in with my brother. He treated me well, but we argued about opinions. I paid him about $500 a month in rent. But it didn't work out because of our arguments. I then moved in with my oldest sibling. They were the sibling that raised me. I once again paid $500 a month. The plan was to save up and get my own place. I was saving, but I kept on impulsively spending money. I stayed with them for 2 years. I was welcome there, but I never managed to make a considerable savings. Every time they asked me about my savings, I lied. I didn't want to, but I couldn't bring myself to tell the truth. Once I started lying about that, I found myself lying to other people. About anything. I do it because I feel like making things up about myself is the only way to make people like me. I feel like a deep void where a person should be. I have moved, but I'm still staying with a family member across the country. I don't know what to do. I constantly feel depressed and suicidal. I moved to try and start new. I have been trying to save again to some success, and I've been trying to stop lying. But my old lies come back to bite me, and I have to lie again to keep images up. The worst part is that I know something is severely wrong with me. I've known that from a young age. I've only ever felt sadness and anger, but I can't seem to help myself. I sabotaged my only friend's attempt to make other friends so that they don't leave me. Throwaway account, as this friend most definitely knows about my main Reddit account. I'm 18, as is this friend, who for simplicity's sake I will refer to as Nick, and we've known each other since 2021. I've always been terrible at making friends, and I truly mean it when I say that he is the only actual friend I have, other than basic, superficial friends who I don't interact with outside of school. I'm more or less his only friend too, and we've been reliant upon each other for 3 years. A month or so ago, someone from another friend group at school asked Nick if he wanted to hang out with them. I immediately became terrified of the idea that Nick could potentially leave me and join this other group of people, who, by the way, despise me. So I immediately started to convince him that it was a bad idea, eventually leading to me making flat-out false screenshots of them speaking about Nick negatively to prove that it wasn't worth it. He eventually agreed with me and decided to not go through with the plans. Now I know for a fact that he'd be better off with them than me, plain and simple. They're objectively better company than hanging around with me, and I know he'd be much happier, but my fear of abandonment is so strong, and I so cannot imagine a life where I don't have a singular friend that I can't bring myself to let go of him. And now the guilt is eating me up alive. It's all I can think about. Every time I see him, all I can think of is how I'm denying him a better social life, out of my own selfishness. I think he's noticed something's up with me. He asked me recently why I looked so miserable all of a sudden. but I can't bear to tell him what I did. I know for a fact he, like me, wants to branch out and have other friends. I should have let him give it a try, but I didn't, and now I feel so terrible about it. He deserves far better, and I really don't know what to do. We're both definitely not in the best place mentally either, and I know for a fact he deserves friends who actually have their lives sorted out, unlike myself. But again, my brain cannot convince itself to actually do what's right and tell him the truth, that I ruined his chance of making new friends for my own selfish gain. I don't know what to do. Is confessing all this on Reddit the best course of action? Probably not. I'm just at a dead end.